Yuji, the protagonist, had a bizarre dream and woke up to find his body drenched in sweat. He headed downstairs for breakfast and then set off for his summer class, where he met up with his three close friends, Misaki, Maho, and Mado. Misaki seemed to have a crush on Yuji, and Maho often teased her about it. In the middle of class, a woman walked in and approached Yuji, pulling him out of class and handing the teacher a permission slip. No one knew who she was, but Misaki revealed that it was Ero, Yuji's cousin, who had returned from studying abroad in the US. Ero had founded an organization that collected lost artifacts and needed Yuji's help. She tricked him into registering with her organization, which she couldn't fully establish without meeting the requirements. She aimed to obtain an S-Class artifact to gain recognition from the higher-ups. That night, they planned to steal the artifact from a gang, as the police would confiscate it if they intervened. Yuji was worried about fighting off the gang, but Ero had a wand that could use magic. As they waited, Ero noticed Yuji was still anxious about the incident 3 years ago. Suddenly, the gang arrived and Ero dashed out, chanting and summoning a swarm of butterflies to blind the gangsters. They grabbed the suitcase, but the gangsters shot at them, forcing them to flee. Ero told Yuji to take the wheel while she cast a spell to lose their pursuers. However, the spell wasn't enough and the suitcase was about to fall, so Yuji rushed to secure it. A bullet hit the suitcase, causing it to open, and a little girl emerged calling Yuji by name. The girl shot fire from her hands, blowing away the gangsters. Misaki arrived at Yuji's apartment building and saw him and Ero bringing the little girl inside. Ero asked Yuji if he knew the girl, but he didn't. However, it was clear the girl knew him. Ero noticed something on the girl's neck, but as soon as she touched it, the girl bit her. The girl rushed towards Yuji, clinging to him and only saying his name. Searching through information at headquarters yielded nothing, and Ero couldn't risk the girl being discovered, so she told Yuji to take care of her for the night. Ero instructed Yuji to procure groceries for dinner, and he was astonished by the quantity of food the two girls had consumed. He encountered Misaki in front of the house, who had been waiting to return the bag Yuji had forgotten in class. She was about to inquire about the girl Yuji brought home when Ero urgently summoned him back inside. When he went up, he found the house in disarray, wrecked by the little girl who had thrown a tantrum when Yuji wasn't around. Ero had discovered that the girl was a dragon and her hands had scales. Essentially, dragons were similar to humans but could transform into full dragons when they matured. Yuji then prepared dinner, still wondering how the girl knew his name. Ero thought they should inform Yuji's parents, but they were likely preoccupied with their artifacts. Yuji decided to give the girl a name and, seeing her hands, chose to name her Rose. Rose then watched TV to learn, and Ero brought out ice cream to teach her how to say names. The next morning, Yuji found Rose sleeping next to him. She had initially been placed in Ero's room, but had wandered over to his during the night. While preparing supplies and having breakfast, a helicopter arrived, and the scientists inside knew there was a dragon present. Ero complained about the organization being short on money, but still extravagantly sending a helicopter to pick them up. The scientist Tokura asked to see Rose's mark for research purposes, and Ero warned him that Rose might bite, but Rose behaved herself. Back at the headquarters, Tokura was eager to study further because it was rare to have a real dragon present. He asked Yuji's name and recognized him as the son of the legendary couple. He continued examining Rose, noting that there was still much unknown about dragons, even though externally they looked similar to humans. 10 years ago, information about dragons was recorded by only one person due to their rarity. The organization classified dragons as top secret. It was known that dragons were born from an egg, and Yuji seemed to recall that he had once encountered a dragon egg. It appeared that Rose was the dragon hatched from the egg he had touched years ago. He recounted getting lost from his parents 10 years ago and seemingly meeting Rose before passing out. This partly explained why Rose was so attached to him. The first person Rose saw was Yuji, so she likely viewed him as her parent. This could be the perfect explanation for why a dragon would love a human. Ero then asked Tokura what should be done with Rose. He still wanted to conduct a few more experiments, suggesting that Yuji's presence might make things easier. Meanwhile, Yuji's three friends were still gossiping about him living with Ero. From now on, Masato kept rambling jealously about Yuji, so Maho punched him out the window. Maho tried calling Yuji, but it seemed he had left his phone at home. Tokura then checked Rose's bracelet but was still unsure if it was an artifact. Suddenly, Yuji's mother called Ero, wanting to meet him. She had heard about Rose and wanted Yuji not to hand her over to the organization. He didn't care much about his parents because they valued artifacts more than him. Rose thought he was very lonely, but he insisted he wasn't and told her not to get too close to him because he didn't like being involved with artifacts at all. He then requested to leave, and outside the door, a handsome man with scales on his hands arrived at the organization. They had prepared someone to take Yuji home, and Ero wanted him to say something to Rose, as this might be the last time he got to talk to her. Unsure of what to say, Rose suddenly started acting strangely. Outside, the handsome man began attacking the guards to get to Rose. The security gates were raised, but he simply melted a hole with his hand to walk through. The entire organization went into alert mode, and he destroyed all the cameras as he made his way inside and encountered the soldiers. He blocked them with his wings and created a whirlwind that swept them away. He continued towards the laboratory to find Rose, introducing himself as Onex. He announced he was there to take Rose, but she didn't recognize him. He claimed to be her fiancé, saying the bracelet she wore was an engagement token. He then demanded Yuji step aside and flicked him into the wall. Rose tried to resist in vain, but Onex ignored Yuji, seeing him as nothing more than a bug. Ero recognized that his earrings were artifacts she had lost 10 years ago. He dismissed her and knocked her unconscious, intending to kill Yuji, but Rose stepped in to stop him and agreed to go with him. Yuji watched helplessly as Rose left, feeling powerless to do anything, while she was visibly upset about being forced away from Yuji. On the way, seeing Rose crying, Onex cast a spell to make her faint so she wouldn't resist. Ero and the others wanted to rescue Rose, but Yuji knew he couldn't defeat a black dragon. Rose then regained consciousness and continued to resist Onex, not understanding why he was taking her. He revealed he wanted her to be his bride, with a bracelet serving as the engagement token, whether she liked it or not. He discovered a tracking device hidden in the bracelet and ordered his men to prepare for a counterattack. He explained that the reason he wanted to pair up was to become stronger. Though he was already powerful, it still wasn't enough to acquire all the artifacts in the world. Meanwhile, Ero asked Yuji if he would go, as Rose had chosen to be captured because of him. Yuji remembered that years ago, Rose had saved him when he fell off a cliff. He decided to rescue Rose, so Ero took him to the vault containing S-Class artifacts, a place his parents had registered the usage rights for him, allowing him to take anything he needed. She led him to a dragon dagger, which only he could awaken, and it was the only weapon that could help him fight a dragon. Holding the dagger, Yuji wished to see Rose again to thank her for saving him. The dagger's power was awakened, and with a single slash, he destroyed the area around him. Rose, having woken up, decided to escape but was caught by Onex. He gave her a choice: obey him or he would deal with Yuji by taking his life. He believed that humans feared dragons and saw them as dangerous creatures, and that Yuji had brought her to the organization out of fear. Yuji and his companions arrived at the Cybele Tower, where they encountered a barrier. Yuji stepped forward and effortlessly cut through the barrier with a single slash. The soldiers then managed to infiltrate the tower using a helicopter. However, they were met with resistance from Onex's men. Ero and Yuji seized the opportunity to slip past the opposition and make their way to the elevator, which took them to the room where the wedding ceremony was being held. Rose was already there, participating in the ceremony. She urged Yuji to leave, fearing for his safety. However, Yuji confessed his affection for her, and Rose revealed her true feelings. Onex, enraged, attempted to attack Yuji, but Rose defended him and returned to his side. Onex tried to persuade Rose to return to him, claiming that humans were enemies of dragons and that their engagement was still valid. However, Yuji nullified the engagement by breaking the bracelet. Onex, furious, transformed into his full dragon form. Yuji's attacks had no effect on him, and bullets were equally useless. Suddenly, marks appeared on Rose's and Yuji's hands, signifying a Paka bond between them. Yuji harnessed Rose's fire and launched it at Onex, defeating him. However, Yuji was injured by a flying blade from Onex. Rose healed him once again, and they returned home with Ero. At home, Rose constantly fussed over Yuji, demanding attention and complaining about various things. Yuji sought help from Ero, who devised a plan and took Rose with her, keeping the secret from Yuji. The next day, the group went to the beach, where Yuji's 3 friends joined them. Misaki tried to hide her swimsuit, but Meo reminded her that she had chosen it to attract Yuji. Misaki then ran to Yuji, but he turned to meet Rose and played with her, leaving Misaki disappointed. Meanwhile, a girl observed them from a distance. That afternoon, Eugen received a letter addressed to him, which led him to a meeting point. Rose and Ero followed him, and at the meeting point, he met the girl who had been watching them earlier. She introduced herself as Maruga, the White Dragon and ruler of ice and snow. She needed their help to recover the White Dragon's sword, which had been stolen by humans. The sword was currently in the possession of Evans, a member of the Holy Order who viewed dragons as messengers of the devil. Maruga offered to provide them with the location, as only they could help her. They couldn't refuse, as Evans would hunt down every dragon and those who harbored them. Although the request seemed threatening, they couldn't refuse. The next day, Yuji followed the directions to the church and met Evans, who was surprisingly friendly and unaware of Yuji's true identity. Yuji inquired about the sword, and Evans explained that it was left behind by a hero who had single-handedly defeated a group of dragons that attacked a village. The hero then left the sword as a legacy for future generations. Rose arrived, and Evans still didn't suspect anything. However, Yuji wanted to be cautious and covered Rose's scales. Suddenly, some men arrived, causing trouble because Rose had previously burned their heads. This enraged Evans, and with one move he froze all of them, including the inside of the church. Yuji then asked Maruga why she wanted to retrieve a sword that had killed her kind. She explained that although the sword was used to kill dragons, it still belonged to the Ice Dragon clan. However, she didn't reveal the full reason. Yuji's friends then arrived, inviting him to the festival that night, and they invited Maruga to join them. That evening, the group went to the festival, and Maruga was surprised to be going with everyone. She kept her distance from the others, and they eventually split up to enjoy the festivities. Rose dragged Yuji to the shooting gallery to win prizes. Yuji won a prize for Rose and was about to win one for Misaki when he heard something happening with Masato and Aruga. He returned to find them being harassed by the same thugs Evans had dealt with earlier. At that moment, Evans showed up again and taught them a lesson, allowing the group to escape. Maruga then shared that the sword belonged to a dragon who had once fallen in love with a human. The villagers executed the girl for approaching the dragon, causing the dragon to go on rampage. When no one was left, a swordsman used the sword to put the dragon out of its misery. Suddenly, Evans approached, seemingly developing feelings for Maruga. This was an advantage for them, as Maruga could lure him outside so they could steal the sword. She agreed, not wanting everyone else to be in danger. Alone the next day, Maruga went to the beach to meet Evans and lured him out. Ero mentioned that Maruga couldn't swim, so she tricked Evans into teaching her. He went to get a float and upon returning started giving Maruga swimming lessons. Her swimsuit suddenly melted and disappeared, causing her to run ashore. Ero lied, saying Maruga's swimsuit had been washed away by the waves, and told Evans to go look for it, instructing Maruga to keep him there as long as possible. Rose chose to stay behind, feeling that Yuji was hiding too many things from her despite their bond. Misaki overheard this and was shocked. They headed to the church and accidentally discovered a man threatening the people praying in an attempt to steal the sword. Ero used her magical staff to blind the man, allowing Yuji to rush in and knock him out. Their plan succeeded, but it alerted Evans, who quickly returned. Yuji then asked Maruga about the sword, knowing it was cursed, and that anyone who approached it would lose their mind. He confessed that the dragon in her story was actually her uncle, and that her father had transformed into a human to execute him in order to maintain family stability. However, mentioning her uncle was a taboo topic, and she could no longer keep the truth hidden. Meanwhile, Max's assistant arrived to inform Evans about the truth regarding the red dragon. Ario recounted how Yuji had once been manipulated by a cursed artifact, leading him to have a negative view of artifacts, but now he still wanted to try retrieving the sword. Rose wanted to speak directly to Evans, hoping he would understand, but no one was sure how he would react if he found out they were connected to dragons. Rose ignored the concern and ran off, leaving Evans in shock by the revelation. Yuji's group was still discussing Maruga's situation and noticed that Rose had been unusually quiet. When they went to check, they found that she had left, so they hurriedly followed. Yuji's friends waited below, wanting him to stay and play, but he had urgent matters to attend to. The three then got into a car and headed to the church to find Evans. Evans, now aware that Rose was a dragon, sat talking with her. He still viewed dragons as enemies of humanity, but Rose argued that she had never done anything wrong and that Evans was forcing himself into this belief. Yuji's group arrived and explained to Evans that the sword was manipulating his mind and that the hero admired by humans was actually Mora's father. Evans, shocked by the truth about Maruga, went into a frenzy and attacked. Maruga had to blast him out of the church, and Yuji remembered that the only way to save the situation was to take the sword from Evans. He then borrowed strength from Rose and ignited a flame. Evans, unable to accept humans and dragons living together, charged at Maruga, forcing Yuji to burn the sword to ashes. Though it was heartbreaking, Maruga had to accept it, letting her uncle's spirit rest in peace. Evans decided he had to gradually accept that Rose and Maruga were themselves and not just dragons for him to hate. The next morning, Maruga bid farewell to Yuji's group, giving Yuji a kiss that made Rose incredibly jealous. Just as Yuji's friends ran out, Rose demanded to marry Yuji, deepening Misaki's depression. A few days later, while Yuji was on his way to a party, he encountered a girl climbing a tree to rescue a cat stuck up there. Both the cat and the girl fell, landing right on Yuji. The girl panicked upon seeing Yuji, but asked why he had stopped her from hitting the ground when she released the cat. Yuji thought she accidentally fell and wanted to catch her. Seeing her attire, he thought she was also attending the party, but she turned away without saying a word. Yuji then arrived at the organization's party and met Ero and Rose, both wanting Yuji to link arms with them. Ero introduced Yuji to several influential figures in the artifact-collecting world, the most notable being a man who had lost everything 10 years ago, including his collection and his daughter. They met Saki, a journalist on the rise, who was aware of Ero's recent recovery on one of the 2 earrings she had lost to Onex. However, the earring was incomplete without its pair, and Ero was determined to retrieve the other one. Yuji and Rose stumbled upon a wanted poster in the newspaper for a criminal who specialized in stealing high-class artifacts and had animal ears and a tail as disguises. Sai promised to keep Ario informed if he had any information about the other earring. Yuji noticed the girl he had met earlier and approached her, but she was taken aback by his presence. While the guests were distracted, the girl slipped away from Yuji, and shortly after, the notorious thief from the news appeared, stealing high-class artifacts. The guards were powerless to stop her, but when she targeted Ario's earring, Yuji intervened, realizing she was the girl from earlier. She was then targeted, but not wanting to involve the lady behind her. She blocked the attack and was about to be caught if Yuji hadn't intervened to let her escape. He was scolded by the guards and apologized, unsure why he acted that way earlier. Back at home, he complained about being interrogated all evening, and Ario thanked him for protecting her earring, explaining that the earrings allowed her to read the thoughts of the person she was talking to. Yuji then went to his room to sleep, but in the middle of the night, he saw Rose sneaking over. He went outside to find the window open and entered Ario's room, catching the beast-eared girl trying to steal the earring. He blocked the door, and Ario threw a binding rope, accidentally tying both of them up. Rose also ran over, calling Yuji a traitor. The thief revealed she had a master, and Ario remarked that any master who sent her to steal was a terrible person. The thief retorted that her master had taken her in when she was abandoned and struggling. She knocked over a bottle of wine, which spilled on Yuji, so they all went to take a bath with Yuji blindfolded. After some fumbling, they all fell into the bathtub, with Yuji merely drowning. While drying their hair, Rose clung to the thief's tail, making her comfortable. The thief wondered why they could be so friendly to her without being disgusted. It was simple. Rose was also a dragon, so there was nothing strange about the thief being half human and half cat. She still wanted to return to her master, but everyone agreed she shouldn't go back to someone who was exploiting her. They pointed out that she was a good person for helping the old lady at the party, but she stubbornly refused to listen. Another bottle of wine fell on her head, knocking her out. When she woke up, Ario had already brought her some food made by Ryuji, so she could eat without worrying about it being poisoned. Ario contacted Tokura to inquire about the identity of her master, but the most likely candidate was over 50 years old, which contradicted her belief that her master was young. Suddenly, Saki appeared, claiming to have found the other earring, but it released knockout gas, causing Ryuji to lose consciousness. Saki instructed A to take Ryuji along with them to their master's hideout. Upon arrival, the bracelet binding A and Ryuji fell off, and Saki decided to lock Ryuji in the basement, considering him an extraordinary individual. I apologized to Saki for allowing herself to be captured and returned to her room with Saki to rest. Saki went out to get food and told A to put Ario's remaining earring in a box. Curious, I tried on the earrings and Saki returned, but I noticed she was wearing the earrings and sat quietly, asking about their power. Saki hid the truth, but thought to himself that the earrings could read minds. He continued to act sweet and gentle in front of A, who asked for permission to take the earrings to the lab. See, I began to suspect something when I returned and asked him if he had raised her. She realized the truth that Saki was the one who had kidnapped her 15 years ago and had treated her as nothing more than an experiment. Upon learning the truth, I resisted and ran away. Ario and Rose had both woken up and received information from the doctor that the person wanted by the organization and Saki were the same. Meanwhile, Ryuji was woken up by Ario but was still worried about A, seeing her wrists bruised from being tied up with him. I still thought Ryuji was the enemy and resisted him, but Ryuji was concerned for her. The earrings did not react to Ryuji's words, making her realize he was completely honest, and she broke down crying. Ryuji wanted her to come with him, and I was moved by his thoughts of wanting to protect her. She agreed, and Ryuji noticed she was wearing his sister's earrings. He led her to a place where they could escape, but Saki blocked their way. Stidiai removed his shirt, revealing tattoos all over his body, and explained that he had merged 5 ancient artifacts into his body. He also revealed that he used to be human but had been transformed into a beast person as part of his plan to sabotage the organization. His motive was revenge for a loved one who had been cursed and manipulated by an artifact, and the organization had refused to help, fueling his hatred and leading to this scheme. Now he needed A to merge with him and become a powerful entity. Ryuji knew he had to act fast to prevent Saki from merging with A, so he grabbed A and ran to the rooftop. Saki sprouted tentacles from his back and climbed up, attacking Ryuji, but he refused to back down and protect A. Just as Saki was about to overpower Ryuji, Rose and Ario arrived, and Ryuji was repeatedly attacked by Saki. Despite this, Ryuji stood his ground, refusing to let it be harmed. Rose flew up to give Ryuji his knife, and when Saki attacked A, Ryuji stood in the way and bound Saki's legs. Ryuji and Rose formed a pact, allowing Rose to help Ryuji break free from the sand binding his legs. Saki, seeing Ryuji growing stronger, used darkness to bind everyone and tried to break Ryuji. Rose used fire to burn away the darkness and Saki's artifacts, causing them to disintegrate, leaving only one artifact, a ran to her master, still feeling sorrow for him. Ero arrived and wanted Saki to stay still, but Saki stood up and activated the last artifact, causing himself to dissolve into dust. He believed what he did was not wrong, and that he owed nothing to the organization he hated. I still wanted to hear his thoughts, and despite his harsh words, the earrings vibrated, showing he had some sincerity. After this incident, I felt she had no family to return to, but Takara arrived and revealed they had found information at Sei's hideout related to A and a family that attended an exhibition. It turned out to be the family of a collector who had lost their daughter 15 years ago, which meant it had a family to reunite with. She decided to go with the organization to meet them, while Ryuji told his sister that he would join the organization to help others and learn more about the artifacts. The next day, Ryuji learned that his sister had quietly enrolled Rose in his school. She had done it secretly because she knew Ryuji would not agree. On the way to school, his sister reminded him that an expert would be coming today to assess his strength. Ryuji and Rose went to class, and Rose was placed in the same class as him. Misaki, who secretly liked Ryuji, saw Rose clinging to him and couldn't control her jealousy, blurting out her frustration. Suddenly, a girl appeared, pulled out a bazooka, and fired at Ryuji, causing the whole class to scatter. Ryuji ran for his life, and the missile chased him. So his sister threw him a knife. Ryuji ran to the stairs and sliced the missile in half. The girl from earlier appeared and declared that Ryuji's standards were not high enough and that he was still too weak. Ryuji then underwent various physical tests, including exercises, radiation tests, and even face planting into white powder. After the assessment, Bianca inquired about Ryuji's parents to determine if his abilities were inherited or developed differently. Masato continued to hover around Bianca, so she used a self-made glove to restrain him. When Ryuji asked about his scores, Bianca revealed that his compatibility with artifacts was average. Meanwhile, the other two friends learned that tomorrow was Ryuji's birthday and began planning a celebration. Bianca then asked Ryuji about his experience with women, which Eriko clarified by asking if he had ever dated anyone. Ryuji replied that he hadn't, and Mato was relieved that despite the attention from girls, Ryuji had no experience. Bianca received a phone call and decided that the final test would be for Ryuji to fight a golem. The goal was to put him under pressure to unleash his maximum strength. The golem charged at Ryuji, and Eriko temporarily blinded the two friends to give Ryuji an advantage. Ryuji and Rose used their pack to increase their power, and Ryuji delivered a fiery blow, slicing the golem in half. Bianca took the opportunity to measure Ryuji's stats, which were the highest she had ever seen. Rose apologized to Ryuji for revealing that she was a dragon. Bianca apologized for the previous day's events and announced her intention to move closer to Ryuji to keep a better eye on him. A few days later, Ryuji's group decided to go camping, and while they were cutting vegetables and onions, a dragon girl named Safi appeared, claiming to be the lover of Onex. Ryuji and Ero were surprised that Onex had been revived, but they weren't shocked that he had another lover. Safi declared her intention to avenge Onex, but her actions were unsuccessful, and she ended up creating a water bubble that splashed the three girls cutting onions. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ero fetched her magic staff and summoned a swarm of butterflies that knocked Safi into the water. Frustrated, Safi left, and Misaki learned that Rose was a dragon and that half-human, half-beast creatures existed. I added another revelation about my beast person identity and hoped Misaki would keep it a secret. Misaki agreed. Back at Onex's headquarters, Safi was scolded by his assistant for being impulsive and childish. She pointed out that if even Onex couldn't win, someone as inexperienced as Safi had no chance. She also mentioned that Onex would be away for a few days and forbade Safi from leaving the premises. Safi reluctantly accepted the order. The next day at school, Rose had to stay with Ryuji's three friends because he and Ero were attending the reopening ceremony of the tower that Onex had previously destroyed. Ryuji's ultimate goal was to see if the organization truly intended to protect Rose. They also met with the doctor and Bianca there. The doctor seemed to understand Ryuji's concerns and reassured him that the rednet left by Onex provided ample material for experimentation, so they wouldn't trouble Rose for a long time unless necessary. Rose's school day ended and she told Misaki she could head home alone. On her way, she encountered Sappy and then almost got into a fight, but Sappy accidentally sabotaged herself. Rose took her home to clean up and dry her clothes. While they were eating together, Sappy admitted that she disliked Rose because Onex always paid attention to Rose instead of her. Rose clarified that she only liked Ryuji, which made Sappy think that if she left Rose alone, no one would compete with her for Onex's attention. Sappy asked Rose if she had undergone the coming-of-age ceremony, which requires a partner to kiss the mark on the hand to betroth. Rose believed she was already mature, but Sappy pointed out the difference between adults and children. Rose asked Sappy to teach her the ceremony, and after instructing her carefully, Sappy left. When Ryuji and Ero returned, Rose asked Ryuji to help her become an adult. Ryuji was startled but eventually understood the situation after listening carefully. Ero advised Rose not to associate with Onex people, but Ryuji didn't hold a grudge. He wanted to know more about the coming-of-age ritual. Ero searched for information but found nothing. Rose explained the ceremony as Sappy had taught her, and Ryuji agreed to perform it since it wasn't too dangerous or difficult. After the ceremony, Rose's body underwent strange changes and she became sensitive to Ryuji's touch, causing her to scream and push him away. Ero handled the situation and reassured Rose that it wasn't serious and that she would get used to it in a few days. Rose feared Ryuji would hate her for yelling at him, but Ero promised to explain everything to him and told her to rest. The next day, Rose woke up and met Ryuji, and they awkwardly glanced at each other during breakfast. They maintained a distance from each other, and everything had changed drastically. Bianca came over asking for food, so Ero asked her to help with the ongoing issue. Bianca borrowed Ero's computer and started accessing a secret organization website. Back to the main character, Rose went to class and ran to Misaki and Maho to ask about her current situation. Rose was worried about her changes and wanted to know more about the coming-of-age ceremony. Misaki and Maho explained that it was a ritual that marked the transition from childhood to adulthood and that it was normal for Rose to experience strange changes. They reassured her that she would get used to it eventually. Meanwhile, Ryuji was struggling to understand Rose's behavior. He couldn't comprehend why she was acting so strangely and pushing him away. Ryuji then turned to Masato for guidance, believing he understood girls better. However, Masato admitted he had information but no experience. Meanwhile, Ero and Bianca were searching for information when Sappy flew in to retrieve her left-behind shoes. Ero quickly summoned butterflies to surround Sappy, demanding to know what was happening to Rose. Sappy revealed she had experienced similar symptoms and recovered after a day of sickness. Bianca asked when Rose's symptoms started and learned it was the previous night. Rose collapsed during gym class, and the teacher wanted to take her to the infirmary, but Ryuji insisted on bringing her to headquarters for examination. The doctor couldn't diagnose Rose as there were no pathogens in her body, making medication impossible. However, her body continued to have a fever and sweat profusely, posing a serious threat if left untreated. Ryuji pleaded with Sappy to help Rose, but she admitted she didn't know what to do. Onex's assistant appeared, claiming to have a way to save Rose. She revealed she knew Sappy's whereabouts due to surveillance and eavesdropping, but demanded Ryuji accompany her to meet Onex alone. On a rooftop, the assistant revealed a message from Onex stating he didn't know how to cure Rose. However, during his journey to find answers, Onex discovered Ryuji was a Dragon's Camp artifact, making Rose afraid of him despite their closeness. Onex concluded Ryuji couldn't stay with Rose. Ryuji felt helpless as Onex's assistant took Rose away, leaving him with no choice but to hand her over. He then threatened the staff at headquarters with his knife, but was later restrained and released after a few days. At school, Ryuji struggled to concentrate in class and was jolted back to reality when Ero brought him food. That evening, Ero complained about being held up by the organization until late, and Ryuji couldn't sleep that night. The next afternoon, Maedi invited Ryuji to the rooftop to confess her feelings, but ended up mentioning Rose instead. Ryuji believed Rose was where she belonged, while Misaki thought that was the problem Ryuji was facing. Misaki observed that Ryuji was not fine and seemed empty and different from when he was with Rose. She urged him not to worry too much because she cared about his well-being. Returning home in the evening, Ryuji found Maruga waiting for him. Meanwhile, Rose had fully awakened at Sappy's place, but had lost her memory due to temporary amnesia caused by the treatment. The assistant intended to take advantage of this to take Rose away, but Maruga intervened, explaining that Onex had always craved Rose's power. Ryuji tried to avoid the conversation, but Maruga chased after him, insisting he listen to what she had to say. Maruga informed Ryuji that there was no information indicating that he negatively affected Rose and asked him to trust her. She explained that the dragon's knife he held reacted with the coming-of-age ritual but wasn't a significant issue. Maruga believed it was more likely because they had feelings for each other. She trusted that Ryuji would prove that dragons and humans could coexist. Maruga then asked Ryuji to carry her home, and upon returning, Sappy appeared with a flight number and details to rescue Rose. Ryuji took a day off school to go with Ero to rescue Rose, but the doctor mentioned that the flight was on a private plane not listed on any schedule, meaning they couldn't intervene directly. Ero insisted they needed to hurry, and Rose was already on the plane. Sappy tried to help her regain her memory before takeoff, but Onex's presence hindered her efforts. The plane took off, but Maruga appeared, freezing the runway and causing the plane to skid. Staffen gave Rose a familiar item to eat, helping her slowly recall memories of Ryuji. As Rose began to remember, suddenly, Onex transformed into a dragon and lifted the entire plane. Ryuji and Rose renewed their bond, unleashing a powerful force that completely obliterated Onex. Due to the overwhelming release of their power, Ryuji and Rose fell into a deep sleep. Afterward, a few days later, Ryuji and his friends returned to their school and resumed their everyday lives, concluding the story.